Quote, "Are you serious?" He nodded. There certainly was something to all those disciplines. But if you didn't do very much physical conditioning, what did you do? What was your training? Dan, I was a very angry and self-centered young man. By making extremely rigorous demands on me for service, he showed me how to give myself away, with real happiness and love. And what better place to learn how to serve, said, than at a service station. Smiling, Joseph said, "He wasn't always a service station attendant, auntie, you know. His life has been extremely unusual and varied." "Tell me about it," I urged. "Hasn't Socrates told you about his past?" "No, he likes to keep it mysterious. I don't even know where he lives." "Not surprising. Well, I'd better keep it mysterious too, until he wants you to know." Hiding my disappointment, I asked, "Did you call him Socrates too? It seems an unlikely coincidence." "No, but his new name, like his new student, has spirit," he smiled. "You said he made rigorous demands on you." "Yes, very rigorous. Nothing I did was good enough, and if I had a single negative thought, he always seemed to know, and would send me off for weeks. As a matter of fact, I may not be able to see him ever again." "Oh, why so?" "He said I had to stay 9 away until I could breathe properly, relaxed and natural. I've been trying, but I just can't." "Ah, that," he said, putting down his broom. He came over to me and put one hand on my belly, one on my chest. "Now breathe," he said. I started breathing deeply, the way Socrates had shown me. "No, don't try so hard." After a few minutes I started to feel funny in my belly and chest. They were warm inside, relaxed, and open. Suddenly, I was crying like a baby, wildly happy and not knowing why. In that moment, I was breathing completely without effort. It felt like I was being breathed. It felt so pleasurable. I thought, who needs to go to movies to be entertained? I was so excited I could hardly contain myself. But then I felt the breathing start to tighten again. "Joseph, I lost it." "Don't worry, Dan. You just need to relax a little. I helped you with that. Now you know what natural breathing feels like. To stabilize it, you'll have to let yourself breathe naturally, more and more, until it starts to feel normal. Controlling the breath means undoing all your emotional knots, and when you do, we're going to discover a new kind of body happiness." Joseph said, hugging him, "I don't know how you did what you did, but thank you so much." He flashed that smile that made me feel warm all over, and puttering away his broom said, "Give my regards to Socrates." My breathing didn't improve right away. I still struggled. But one afternoon, after an early workout in the gym, pressing weights with my improving leg, I was walking home and noticed that without my trying, my breathing was completely natural, close to the way it felt at the cafe. That night, I burst into the office, ready to regale Socrates with my success, and apologize for my behavior. He looked like he'd been expecting me. As I skidded to a halt in front of him, he said calmly, "Okay, let's continue," as if I'd just returned from the bathroom, rather than from 6 weeks of intensive training. "Have you nothing else to say, Soc?" "No, well done, lad, no, looking good. Praise and blame are forms of manipulation, of which you no longer require." I shook my head in exasperation, then smiled with effort. Although I was going to try my best to be more respectful, I was hurt by his indifference. But at least I was back. When I wasn't cleaning toilets, I was learning new, and more frustrating exercises, like meditating on internal sounds until I could hear several at once. One night, as I practiced that exercise, I found myself drawn into a state of peace and relaxation I'd never known before. For a period of time, I don't know how long, I felt as if I was out of my body. This was the first time that my own efforts and energy resulted in a paranormal experience. I hadn't needed Soc's fingers pressing into my head. Excited, I told him about it. Instead of congratulating me, he said, "Dan, don't get distracted by your experiences. Cut through the visions and sounds, and see the lessons behind them. They're signs of transformation, but if you don't go beyond them, you won't go anywhere. If you want an experience, go see a movie. It's easier than yoga. Meditate all day, if you like. Hear sounds and see lights. or even see sounds and hear lights. You will still remain a jackass if you become trapped by experience. Let it go. I've suggested that you become a vegetarian, not a vegetable. Frustrated, said, I'm only experiencing, as you call it, because you told me to. Socrates looked at me as if surprised. Do I have to tell you everything? About to get furious, I found myself laughing. He laughed too, pointing at me. Dan, you just experienced a wondrous alchemical transformation. You've transmuted anger to laughter. This means your energy level is much higher than before. Barriers are breaking down. Maybe you're making a little progress after all. We were still chuckling when he handed me the mop. The following night, for the first time, Socrates was completely silent about my behavior. I got the message. I was going to have to be responsible for watching myself from now on. That's when I realized the kindness in all of his criticisms. I almost missed them. I wasn't aware of it then, nor would I realize it until months later, but that evening, Socrates had stopped being my parent and started being my friend. I decided to pay Joseph a visit and tell him what had happened. As I walked down Shattuck, a couple of fire engines wailed by me. I didn't think anything about it until I neared the cafe and saw the orange sky. I began to run. The crowd was already dispersing when I arrived. Joseph had just arrived himself, and was standing in front of his charred and gutted cafe. I was still 20 yards away from Joseph when I heard his cry of anguish, and saw him drop slowly to his knees and cry. He leaped up with a scream of fury, then he relaxed. He saw me. Dan, it's good to see you again. His face was serene. The fire chief came over to him, and told him that the fire had probably started at the dry cleaners next door. Thank you, Joseph said. Oh, Joseph. I am so sorry. Then my curiosity surfaced. Joseph, saw you a minute ago. You were very upset. He smiled. Yes, I felt very upset, so I let it out. I remembered Soc's words, let it flow and let it go. Until now it had just been a nice idea, but here before the blackened, waterlogged remains of this beautiful cafe, this fragile warrior had just demonstrated complete mastery of his emotions. It was such a beautiful place. Joseph sighed, shaking my head. Yes, he said, wistfully, wasn't it? For some reason, his calm now bothered me. Aren't you upset now at all? He looked at me dispassionately, then said, I have a story you might enjoy, Dan. Want to hear it? Well, okay. In a small fishing village in Japan, there lived a young, unmarried woman who gave birth to a child. Her parents felt disgraced and demanded to know the identity of the father. Afraid, she refused to tell them. The fisherman she loved had told her, secretly, that he was going off to seek his fortune, and would return to marry her. Her parents persisted. In desperation, she named Hakuin, a monk who lived in the hills, as the father. Outraged, the parents took the infant girl up to his door, pounded until he opened it, and handed him the baby, saying, this child is yours, you must care for it. Is that so? Hakuin said, taking the child in his arms, waving goodbye to the parents. A year passed and the real father returned to marry the woman. At once they went to Hakuin to beg for the return of the child. We must have our daughter, they said. Is that so? Said Hakuin, handing the child to them. Joseph smiled and waited for my response.